So, there has been a community update in the past few days from DICE on their official Battlefield page on Instagram, and it's basically covering, as you can see on screen there, the class system and how it's going to work in the new Battlefield game, which will hopefully be released this year. In just a moment's time, I'll pop back up on screen all those different tabs of the post. We'll go through each one, do a bit of an in-depth analysis, and basically see what this could potentially mean for the new Battlefield mechanically, and generally just what features they're going to go with, specifically on the class system. And, are they going to be potentially using stuff from old games? Are they going to be redesigning features from old games? Or is this going to be something new and innovative that they're adding or engineering into the game, and it's something that we're going to experience for the first time? Is it going to be something good? Is it going to be something potentially bad? And generally an overall opinion as to what we would potentially like to see. Getting straight into it and looking at the first picture or first slide of that post on Instagram, it's pretty much just a brief overview of what the post is going to be about, of course, being on the class system. The main thing, I guess, to point out here is it says part 1, and there's 4 different pictures or 4 different slides to this post, of which only the first one says part 1. So I don't think that each picture here is part 1, part 2, part 3. I genuinely think that it means part 1, as in this is the first iteration or first update to the player base on the class system and what they're trying to do with it. So I definitely expect a part 2 to come out at some point in the future when more testing takes place, when feedback has been given, and when there's been tweaks and updates made. And the body of text under this first picture mentions testing and refining the most popular class mechanics from the franchise's history. So it's going to be interesting to see in the following pictures on the post, where or what games they're basically going to reference and what key features can we link to those older games. Moving on to the second picture in the post, we can see that it covers classes design philosophy. And amongst this entire body of text here, there are 2 key things to pick out. The first bit is going to be that second little sentence, which is going to be that the class system is defined by 2 main components, customizable and class defining, which is going to be shown on the third picture. And the final part of the text there, the 4th paragraph, basically says that the class defining components are designed to enhance pick up and go playability. And from my analysis of the next slide, which I'll pop up on screen in just a moment's time, it has references or links possibly to Call of Duty. So let's get into the third slide now, where we're going to look at those 2 different components. So moving on to the third picture of the post, this is where all the meat and bones and all the juicy bits come out on the class system, of course, breaking it down into the customizable section and the class defining section. So let's start off with the customizable section, and let's get straight into the top point, being about the weapon loadouts. This point firstly mentions fully customizable weapon loadouts, allowing you the freedom to play the way you want. Now, I think this is hinting at mass customization and, of course, way more and in a much greater capacity than we've been used to in recent historical shooters of World War I, Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5. Now, this is going to be a good thing, I think. It's hinting at, of course, playing the way you want, therefore potentially being able to use whatever gun you want, even if it's typically considered to be a close-range SMG. Customization options such as a high magnification zoom scope or different bullet types to increase bullet velocity for longer distances are going to allow you to switch up the gun to be able to play at different playstyles or any different range, even if it's not meant to be. So this is going to massively, increase or change the skill gap across the guns and across the meta, and that's, I think that's only a good thing for the game. The second point mentioned under the weapon loadouts point is the fact that you can switch to any other weapon to meet the needs of your squad. So this is probably a controversial point, because what this is effectively saying is that there's not going to be any class-locked weapons or faction-locked weapons, which is something that a lot of people have a very strong opinion on. I would say that there are 3 levels to this in terms of how strict they could be with class-locked weapons. The most strict way, of course, is going to be faction-locked weapons. In Battlefield 5, for example, which it wasn't done, although a lot of people had a strong opinion on it, would be, for example, guns such as the MP40, MG42, which are German weapons, to only be used when playing as the German side, and guns such as the American guns like the M1 Garand, only being able to be used when you're playing as the Americans. I partly agree with the fact that they didn't choose to go with this option in Battlefield 5 because it would severely limit, the guns which you could use, and, you're at the mercy of the game spawning you in on a certain side to be able to go and then use those weapons you need to complete your challenges, etc. And it would become very frustrating, with people joining or leaving games to try and complete challenges or to use certain weapons that they want to use. The second level to this is going to be class-locked weapons, and this is what we've got in Battlefield 5, where, for example, you can only use a sniper in the scout class or a machine gun in the support class. I think this is a good way to potentially go with the new Battlefield, because if there's going to be perks attached to the different classes, then if there is a meta determined by the player base on one of those classes, then every person or the majority of people are going to use that class all the time. It's going to affect squad play because nobody's going to be using the other classes and will simply just outright imbalance the game. Now, the final level, and the level which it looks like they're going with, is basically full customization. You can choose whatever gun you want to use on any class. Of course, there might be some limitations because you might be missing out on some perks or specialties that you could acquire by using the right weapon in the right class. However, full customization will potentially lead, if the perks and if the specializations are not done properly and are not balanced, will lead to players just using whatever the best class is, as I've just said, and just using any weapon they want, again causing an imbalance. So this is something I definitely would change. I would change it to level 2, being class lock specific, but leave a comment below which one do you think is best. Looking at the second point now on the left side there for customization, it's basically referencing class gadgets, overall saying that we're going to be able to carry 2 gadgets. I don't think this is a shock or a surprise. You can see on screen now I'm playing Battlefield 5 with the assault class, and as is worded in the class selection screen, the rocket launcher there as well as the dynamite are both classed as gadgets. So you've got 2 different gadgets there, which looks like it's matching Battlefield 5 as well as previous games. So nothing as a shock or surprise there, and there's not really anything to read into. The third point under customization, as you can see there, is training, and it basically mentions that you're going to be able to unlock a series of traits or perks during the course of a game, of course, as you play, as you earn more points, and you will unlock these different tiers as you go along. Now, of course, this probably rings a bell in everybody's head back to games of Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline, where you had field upgrades or even reputation perks. So in effect, the perks that you'll earn and increase in level throughout the course of a Battlefield 6 match are similar to specializations in Battlefield 5. However, obviously the difference is being that these are going to be specializations on classes and they only unlock throughout the course of a game. It's not something that you level up and you can choose and you have them automatically there at the start of every game. Now, I do think and would possibly suggest that simply having the classes level up and having a specialization tree where those specializations, once unlocked, are permanently there at the start of every game when you're playing would be better. I think it's an unfair advantage to more experienced or better players because obviously the experienced players are going to unlock these perks much faster throughout the course of a game, way before the less experienced players, and those experienced players, which are already way better than the less experienced players, are going to have an even bigger advantage to be able to get those kills more easily, and it's going to make the gameplay experience more frustrating for the lower experienced players. I mean, take a shot every time I say experienced players. But that's my overall opinion there on the perks. I think just make it something that once you unlock, you get it every single time, because those lower experienced players might find them having multiple games where they don't even get to the 3rd or 4th tier of those perks, in which case it's a completely pointless feature for them. And lastly, for the 4th and final point on the customizable side of that 3rd image of the post, it mentions throwables, basically with a key thing there saying that they're going to provide tailored throwables. So, I mean, as you can see on screen, just as one example from Battlefield 5, the smoke grenade, which is a throwable grenade, is only available to be used on the medic class and the scout class, and it can't be used in the assault class or the support class, as well as just shown on screen, the support class is the only class in Battlefield 5 to have the impact grenade. So there's going to be some unique throwables which I mean, it could be the throwables, grenades could be used on every class, but I think again it's a good thing that some of the throwables are going to be class locked. So again, sticking to the class lock of weapons and also having some class lock on throwables or gadgets. Okay, so let's move on to the right side of the class system image, looking at the class defining points, with the first point mentioning a signature weapon, which in effect means if you use the signature weapon with the correct class, then you'll benefit from an extra perk or bonus, which in this case it mentions if you're using a sniper rifle with the scout class, then you will get an increased breath hold duration. Now, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. You know, it's a good thing to incentivize people to use the right guns in the right classes if they're not going to go with class-locked weapons. Although I do still think class-locked weapons would be the better way to go. I think this is a good point. However, this is going to be a hit or a miss depending on how balanced the perks are which they add. Because looking at that first example there of increased breath holding duration, my experience from previous shooting games, you know, in previous Battlefield games, is you hardly ever need to hold your breath with snipers. Of course, maps are so big, it takes a lot of time on Battlefield maps to run around to find enough enemies to even get out of breath from finding so many targets to shoot at, and of course needing to hold your breath. Scopes typically are always stable as well in Battlefield games, so you know, it's very rare that you do need to hold or run out of breath. So already just looking at that first one for the scout class just makes me think that it's kind of pointless and useless, and I'd therefore be able to use the snipers in other classes, and maybe the other classes have perks that I would benefit more from. Moving on to the second point in the class defining section, it mentions a signature trait whereby with each class you'll have passive bonuses tailored to optimize your role. And it gives an example of a recon player which will be able to automatically spot enemies when you're aimed down sight, and it says encouraging the use of weapons that complement this specialization. Now, overall, I think it can be a little bit complicated potentially to interpret this. I think it's simply just referring to a feature which we've got in Battlefield 5 with different class traits, which I can show on screen now. But it is a little bit confusing mentioning signature traits along with the previous point of signature weapons, you know, and it mentions in the last sentence, encouraging the use of weapons that complement this specialization. You know, is that suggesting that we have to use a specific weapon to unlock that trait, or is that just a trait we get just for using that class? I think, you know, perhaps it's just saying, you know, use a sniper with a sight to spot long distance targets, but I don't think you do need to use a sniper. I think you can do it with any gun, but I think that point there needs to be a bit more clear. But overall, I think it's just referring to the Battlefield 5 feature which we've got, which again, I think is a positive and is a bonus. Moving on to the third point in the class defining section, it mentions a signature gadget, which in effect is a unique or class locked, class specific gadget, which I guess we can talk about examples from Battlefield 5, you know, the scout class having the spawn beacon, or even just the assault class having the rocket launchers as well as dynamite, which are things which are not in any other class. Now this point can also be considered slightly confusing, and to read into it, basically looking at the last sentence, it mentions separate from what you may choose as gadgets within your loadout. So we've had the customizable section on the left, which mentions gadgets and being able to have two different gadgets, as I showed we had on the assault class, which is, you know, the rocket launcher and the dynamite. The right side is saying having a signature gadget, so unique to that class, which is separate from the gadgets you choose in your loadout. So is this suggesting that we can have three gadgets, one class specific and two, you know, of our own, which can be used on any class? Or is it just saying that we can have two gadgets in total, but there are class specific ones which we can choose from should we desire? Now, there might be a problem or an issue with having three gadgets in total, so two normal gadgets and a class specific gadget, because we know how much, you know, explosive spam can be on close range maps such as Underground. It can be an absolute nightmare, and it can be, you know, for some people they enjoy it, a lot of people they don't enjoy it, and it ruins the experience of the game. Having three gadgets, all mostly explosives, obviously would probably be a nightmare. So hopefully it just means two gadgets rather than three. But yeah, so that point needs probably a bit more clarification as well. Lastly, looking at the fourth and final point on the right side, it mentions default weapon packages, which in effect are going to be pre-built weapon loadouts. Now, this links directly to Call of Duty. That's the most memorable or notable game or FPS shooter I remember playing for years and years and years, which had pre-built loadouts when you started the game as level 1. Of course, they become unusable or you never use them after the first few days once you've leveled up. So maybe it is a pointless thing, but this is a point which does link to Call of Duty, a possible feature from that. As well as if we go back and look at the first point on the left side, on the customizable side, being about weapon loadouts. This also, references the fact that we'll be able to have multiple different loadouts for the assault class or multiple different loadouts for the scout class, which again will allow us to quickly chop and change between different classes for different play styles throughout the course of the game. Unlike Battlefield 5, where we've only got one loadout per class, and obviously you've got to go and change all your guns and setups, whatever you want, in the game. So this will be a massive time saver, and of course, so you can quickly change guns during a game. So again, only a positive thing. Maybe the pre-built loadouts will be useless after a certain amount of time, but for new players, it's always a good thing to have. So yes, we have just had a first look, an in-depth analysis into the first iteration of the class setup system for Battlefield 6, along with speculation as to what the future may be, as well as what features are being reused from past games. As of course you can tell, this is my first attempt at a Battlefield 6 news or informative video, so please smash a like for me if you found anything interesting or useful, and subscribe if you do want to see future Battlefield 6 related videos or just Battlefield content in general. I've got a few ideas lined up, and I'm sure I'll get into them very shortly. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.